according to the. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Shed the Shame Period podcast. I am your co-host, Alex, and I am the founder and CEO of The Agenda Period, alongside Algelin, the CEO and founder of Ladybox. We are joined today by Maggie Greene. She is the Chief Everything Officer, which I just have to say is the cutest freaking thing I've ever heard. I love when I read that in her bio, of Maggie Greene Style, a one-woman band on a mission to transform the way we see ourselves at work. As a passionate ally, communicator, and fashionista, she puts the personal in personal brand and style with a focus on low barrier, high impact resources. She supports clients on all manners of styling, from wardrobe to resume and everything in between. Her second-hand first approach helps counter consumption culture and reduce global fashion waste. Oh, hell yeah. This is so cool. I really loved reading your bio, and I'm excited to read it again right now. So Maggie, thank you for being here. As we kind of mentioned before, we like to start with a cycle check-in. So if you know, let us know where you're checking in today with your cycle.
So interestingly, I don't have much of a regular cycle anymore, but knowing that the podcast was coming up, I did a little bit of math, did a little kind of gut check with myself. I am on the tail end of luteal, gearing up for the beautiful menstruation phase.
Yay. We like to call that a free range cycle, where maybe it's a little mystical, a little unpredictable, but totally grooving. So thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Algelin, where are you checking in with your cycle?
I'm free range too. I don't know. I have like a distracted energy a little bit this week. So maybe I am gearing up for menstruation, my winter season. So probably tail end of fall too, just like you, Maggie.
Cycle twins.
I'm in the luteal phase, but not that far. I'm in like the high energy, but kind of intense energy part of my luteal phase. And like a little bit more maybe in tune with my feelings or sensitive part will probably come next week. So I'm still in that. Whoa, so great time to do a podcast. I actually think it's always a great time to do a podcast because we get to explore these different facets of ourselves. So thank you so much for checking in with us with your cycle. I think it's a really great thing for folks to listen to when we do these. So let's dive in. I would love for you to tell us about your first period and anything that stands out to you about that experience.
So my first period, I actually remember the exact date. It was August 1st, and I won't give the year, but I was 11 years old. It was obviously in the summertime, and as the cramping sensation came on, I was out in the yard picking up dog poop. We were anticipating some house guests, some out-of-town family, and I was in an environment where appearances, or at least keeping up the illusion of appearances, was really important. So picking up dog poop and literally feeling like I'm going to defecate myself. Like that's it. That feeling was the only thing I could like really relate to. I was like, this is so strange, but also familiar, super painful. I'm doubling over. I lived with my maternal aunt at the time, and I kept saying like, something's wrong. I'm going to have to go inside and go to the bathroom. And she was like, no, we got a deadline, right? Like the family's going to pull up any minute. We got to get this stuff done. Everything needs to be in its place and look perfect. And like, she thought I was trying to get out of my chores, I guess. So, obviously not acknowledged, not encouraged in that moment. It finally got to the point where there was like no turning back. I had to go inside. And like I said, I thought I was going to have to poop. That's not what happened. But yeah, I vividly remember like the cold feeling of the toilet seat and just this really intense moment of like out of body, almost like what is happening to my body. And I'm 11 years old, didn't have a whole lot of information. Like these types of things were not part of conversations among women in my family. It was definitely shameful. I wasn't sure what to do about it. Called my aunt in, and she kind of like threw a pad through the door and was like, take care of this, and then get back to what you were doing. But yeah, my mother at the time was in a different state. So from like 3,000 miles away, she told me later on she remembers that day and had felt like sympathy cramps in that moment. She said, I knew, I could just feel it. Something was going on with you. We weren't in contact at that time. Yeah, definitely not a pleasant experience. It wasn't a celebration of womanhood for me. I felt like my body was betraying me. Yeah, very vivid. August 1st, and I'll never forget 21 years later thinking like, my menstrual cycle is old enough to drink. Like, I don't know. But yeah.
I love that. Like my menstrual cycle is old enough to drink. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
You should actually tweet that. It would probably get retweeted a bunch. Not gonna
It's been
lie.
a few years ago now. We're almost ready to like rent cars, I think. That's 25. But yeah. So not
I
pleasant.
no, I love. Well, I found it very interesting that like your mom, states away, felt like that connected to you to like sense something. How did that make you feel? And then how did it make you feel when your aunt was just like, yeah, just take care of it and move on? And I want to read something that like the founder of Get Some Days posted. They like have a period pain relief product, but they posted, is period pain normal, or have you just internalized the capitalist belief that productivity is more important than listening to your body? And so like when you talked about like, you're trying to tell your aunt something was going on with your body, and then when you finally told your aunt what was happening, she just was like, here's this, let's sweep it under the rug and you keep doing what you're doing. And then you have your mom who states away is like, I sense that. So I would love for you to share more about how those two interactions made you feel, and maybe like how they have shaped your relationship to your body and how you listen to it now.
I should lay a little bit of a layer of context here. So my aunt and my mother at various times in my life are what I would consider my primary abusers. I suffered at both of their hands, verbally, emotionally, mentally for a number of years. So that specific incident with starting my period was sort of par for the course, out of context, it's a bit jarring. But in retrospect, I feel like that, she wouldn't have handled it any other way. It made me feel really small, or maybe like I wanted to be small or invisible. Like if I could have just evaporated into thin air and disappeared in that moment, I think it would have been more palpable, palatable than I felt actually in that moment. It was, it wasn't really until later that I felt grief over it. It seems like a missed opportunity, right? For like a bonding moment among women, close women in my life, influential women in my life. Of course, with, my mom sharing later that she knew even before she really knew that something was going on, that I had reached this milestone and kind of become a woman, matured into a woman. That was, as profound between the two of us as our relationship, just like kind of taking it to a whole new level. You hear about twins and siblings, maybe they're adopted or they're orphaned or whatever, and then from worlds apart, they share some sort of metaphysical, like bigger than reality connection. And so that was really interesting. As far as how it impacted my life, among peers at school, it was like this really big deal during that time. Like, have you started? Have you not started? And sort of that was like divisive a bit. There was the camp that had the shared experience, and then those of us who hadn't started yet were like anticipating that moment. Once it arrived, I didn't feel like I necessarily fit into either camp. It was like, okay, this is something I'm going to be dealing with for the rest of my life. And I very much felt like it was a burden. You mentioned the period pain. Yes, period pain is real. Oh my gosh. It's part of the reason why I got on birth control, was because it was heavy and really painful. I was out of commission for days at a time, even when I was younger, so it's it's complicated, right? It's the short answer. But yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really tough. I think that is kind of underpins a lot of why we wanted to start this podcast, is like these should be moments that are welcoming and a branch and a bridge for folks to come like through this experience. And so often they're really toxic. And so I'm so sorry that you had that experience. That's really, really crappy, because I think they do set us up for a lifetime of disconnection and pain with our bodies, because we're taught to not listen to it and shut it off and shut it down. And I think that really can start to explain many experiences that we've heard on this podcast. So we see you, and thank you for sharing that. I know there was something you wanted to talk about in terms of a fluid. Is now maybe a good time to talk about that, and there might be some trigger warning around this whole section of the conversation. And so if trigger warnings, we'll put some more in the show notes, but we can just put that pin in here. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about fluid.
Yeah. So as if the period experience were not enough, just emotionally challenging and psychologically burdensome. As we all know now, as fully formed adults, our bodies as women produce a number of fluids and colors and smells and all of these things. But around the exact same time, I would say it was the same year that I started my period. My aunt, again, at the time, my primary abuser, got home from school one afternoon, and she had been digging in the dirty laundry and had pulled out a pair of my underwear. And inside the underwear was vaginal discharge, right? Totally normal. Didn't know that at the time. And I think this story and the circumstances around it sort of illustrate a bit of an ignorance, totally a lack of privilege as far as where we grew up and the culture we grew up, just not having access to knowledge and resources. That's not to justify her behavior, but she confronted me with it in a very, very shameful way. It was as if it were evidence of my sexual activity or something like that. And again, I'm 11 years old. That is not even entering my mind. She called me explicit names alluding to that. And I will never forget, like, as I'm telling the story, I can hear her. I can see this moment in the bathroom in my mind. It's like, smell it, like smell your shame, smell it, smell it, smell it. And I didn't know what the hell it was. Again, like my body had betrayed me. I didn't know it was there, and so in that moment, just talk about wanting to disappear, right? Wanting to escape that scenario. And there was nowhere to go. It was, all I could say was, I'm sorry. And I didn't even know what I was apologizing for, right? She gave me simple and very pointed instructions on how to take care of it by hand washing, which I appreciate to this day. Sometimes there are certain stains that just won't come out in the regular wash. You got to really get deep and intimate with it. Yeah, that left an imprint. I mean, clearly I'm having a visceral reaction now. I didn't expect that so many years later, but and now I know it's normal. And I've seen I forget it was a photographer, she and her husband did this project, like My Beautiful Cervix, it was called, and tracked it, like the actual imagery of the cervix and how it evolves over a 28-day period. And it was like, it changed my entire world. And I was probably in my early 20s, late teens, maybe, when I discovered this. And even looking at it, I felt a little, like, I hope no one sees over my shoulder. This is really explicit, but it taught me so much. And I was just really inspired by the concept of my beautiful cervix. Like, how could this crazy thing that betrayed me be beautiful? But it is,
Entirely. Maggie, you shared something I was going to use the word visceral too, and hard, and you were very brave in sharing that. So thank you for, being vulnerable vulnerable enough to share that with us and the listeners. And I hope that them hearing that story, they can like think of like a time where they maybe felt the same. And so we have this this shaming moment, and it's disgusting that you had to even deal with that. And yes, like there are circumstances as to why it happened. And I'm glad that you said it was still not justified. Mm-hmm. Now that we know this, what have you been able to do to bring yourself back to, or to bring more love and light into you, your soul, your heart, to help you shed the shame?
I just want to drop a pin real quickly in case someone isn't sure what she's talking about, because unfortunately the knowledge is still not out there as openly and honestly as it should be. That was an experience of what I think was probably fertile quality cervical mucus, which happens around the time of ovulation. And it's totally normal. I thought that this goop was really alien when I was younger. No one ever found it in a laundry basket, but I thought I was like, do I have an STI? I've never had sex. What's going on? So if you're listening, there are lots of good graphics online that can show you. I may even link some in the show notes of what that would look like. And it's a totally normal secretion, but it didn't feel normal. And, I think there is some of that fear popping out on all sides in that experience. So that's really unfortunate. And so we hope that's part of what can happen is when you learn this information, you can use that for your own body and to support the bodies of menstruators in your life. So I just wanted to kind of put that in there too.
Yes, Alex. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Same. Took the words right out of my mouth. Thank you, Alex. Like, I wish I had known you then. I wish my aunt had been exposed to people like you then, so we had access to that information when it was particularly relevant and important. Aljalyn, to answer your question, what have I done? I mean, if we're shedding shame and we're smashing stigma in this conversation, I'll say, in the spirit of mental health awareness, like therapy, changed my life. I didn't embark on that journey until much later on. I was in college, actually, when I made the decision for myself to explore that, but that was huge, integral, and I would say a lifesaver, certainly at times. I also wrestled, and still to this day wrestle, with this notion of family, because growing up, so many people who said they loved me also hurt me, in the same breath. So there's family that you inherit, that you're biologically connected to, and then there's chosen family. And when you get to the point where you're out on your own and you're independent, you get to make all of your own decisions for your life. You also get to choose who you spend your time with, who you share your energy with, and who you let in ultimately. So having that realization, in part influenced by therapy, and really acting on that, surrounding myself more with people who actually gave a crap about me, and it wasn't just in empty words, made a huge difference. I have some of the most amazing people in my life, including my partner now, people who I consider family, and we aren't biologically related at all. So I think that definitely has made a difference. It's also having, as a survivor of abuse, there's a lot that I had to unpack and reevaluate and look at for myself. The headline being, it wasn't my fault, that just knee-jerk reaction of wanting to apologize in that moment. Like, I'm sorry for who I am. I'm sorry for what my body does. I'm sorry for all these things I don't have control over. Sort of just not apologizing anymore at all, but also realizing that I didn't have any accountability there, that nature is a beautiful, crazy, messy thing. And in being able to embrace that, as an adult, has made a huge difference.
I just want to say, fuck sorry. So yeah, none of that anymore.
Fuck sorry. Yeah.
Fuck it. And yay me, because I'm awesome. Yeah. So I know that sorry for the pause. I know that you had another part of a topic discussion of choosing to be childless, child-free. I love that. Yes, I am a mom. I also wholeheartedly believe that it is a woman's choice to choose. It's her choice to choose. Her choice to choose. So, would you love to share more about that?
Yeah. So again, culturally, like I was raised in the deep South, central Kentucky to be specific. There was like this generational sort of obligation or understanding that like this is what you do, right? You get married, you have a family, you have children, and that's like your birthright as a woman, but also your responsibility and all of that. And we're talking about cycles today. The cycle of abuse was really, it was important for me to like draw a really hard line in the sand and say, you know what, this shit stops here. And choosing to be childless is one very active way for me to make sure that that is the case, right? That was hard, and it's still hard today because you hear about this like cliche of the biological clock ticking, like if I change my mind today, could I still do it? And there were tons of people, women and men and non-binary individuals alike, although mostly men, and women, who challenged that decision. Like, you're going to change your mind, are you sure, are you sure? Yes, I'm freaking sure. I'm sure that I'm making this decision, it's the best one for me. It's it's hard because I feel like I do have a very nurturing sort of instinct and inclination. I love kids, don't get me wrong, and I would love nothing more than to borrow them for an afternoon sometimes and then take them back at the end of the day. Like, it's not anything against children. I probably would make a hell of a mom. I've been told that by colleagues, friends, family my whole life, but I think I'd rather channel that nurturing energy and that capability into things like my business, where I get to be kind of a mom to a lot of people, right? For just a little bit of time, and then like hang up the responsibility at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I mean, obviously, not everybody that chooses to not have children, it's not because they have a dislike towards them. It's primarily what I have heard the most is they didn't have the language at the time of this, but they just wanted to end the generational trauma. And so they're like, well, if I can have power over that, then that is my power and my choice. Also, if you ever did change your mind, that is entirely okay for you to change your mind, and it is entirely okay for you to never change your mind. So, yeah.
Thank you for saying that. That's got me thinking about the other piece I wanted to touch on, in terms of choosing to be childless, and even the influence and introduction of birth control into my life. I have not been fully sterilized, although I've thought about that. I think what holds me back from going in that direction is just major invasive surgery. Never been under for that long, never experienced anything that invasive before. And I know it's quick and easy and all that stuff these days, but I chose to get an IUD. It was like the next best thing, or a long-term solution. And yeah, again, we're going back to the South here. I was in Kentucky at the time. I had to shop around for a few doctors that would actually authorize insertion of the IUD. And that was the pushback that I always got was, well, at least with those first few doctors, like, there is a chance, there's a risk that you won't be able to produce. And that's not a concern, get it in me. But there were doctors that flat out refused because I had never had children before.
That's such bullshit. I got one when I was 17 or 18. And like, no questions asked, but I was not in the South. But I had a friend who was from more, what we think of as more progressive places, who wanted to get the permanent sterilization. And she was she was like 27 or 28. She could not find one, period, to do the surgery for her, because they said you would have had to have had a male and female at birth child, not just like 2 children of any gender, but you would have had to have one of each until they would do it, because you might want to try later. She's like, well, I don't want to try ever. That's the point of this. I don't want to have kids. It's like, well, what if, like, doctors would say, like, what if you meet the right man? He won't be the right man if he's going to pressure me to have children. Like, I don't want to have children.
What if I like women? What the fuck? Where's these standards coming from? Now you got me fired up a little bit, Alex. I'm like, okay, we dropped an F-bomb or two. Like, can we just like acknowledge out in the open right now, like, patriarchy is alive and well, you know?
Yes, sadly.
It's such bullshit. It's such freaking bullshit. But men can get a vasectomy. Oh, and then like once you are married, you have to have your partner sign off. So I just delivered twins in November. They asked me if I wanted to, like there was the paperwork if I wanted to my tube side, and that like then they had a place for my husband's signature. Because like I couldn't make that decision on my own, but any man of any age can go get a vasectomy without anyone fucking.
Say to that. What did you say to that?
I was like, well, I'm not going to make that decision right now. And if I am ready to make that decision, I don't need my husband's signature. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was like, oh, full of rage.
Husbands used to have to sign off to give permission for a woman to have her own bank account or credit card. Like,
yeah,
how is this any different than that?
That didn't change
Still
until like
even,
the 70s, 1970s.
Well, it's still an issue even like for a married woman who is the primary breadwinner of the family. It is still an issue to purchase a home. And even when she's the one that is going to be putting the majority of the down payment, if not all of it, and handling the financial part of the mortgage. And she, like, I have this friend, like she had to have her husband's signature on it, or like have her husband go with her to get all the paperwork done. I'm like, and we live in Washington State and this happened? No.
Rage, just full of rage.
Fuck the patriarchy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really interesting, and it's hard. This is a whole different kind of spin on this conversation, and I'm super happy that I entered motherhood, but it's hard to know. I didn't make the decision in a vacuum, and it's hard to know what kind of choice any of us would make if we didn't have all the cultural pressures and expectations and kind of this plan laid out of what we're supposed to do, yet in a society that doesn't actually help once the children are here, doesn't help with paid family leave, doesn't help, like with all of these additional burdens that typically women end up shouldering at the end of the day, more so than anyone else in this equation. So I think that, was very brave to just say like, that's it, I'm breaking out of this for my life, and this is what it looks like. So thank you for sharing that.
So I actually have a really short, really funny story. We've gotten kind of dark and deep and depressing here on a couple of notes, but it just occurred to me, I should tell you all this. The gynecologist who finally agreed, my savior, she was my hero, who finally agreed to insert the IUD. It's been over 10 years ago now. I've had this, I think this is my second one. Beautiful woman, really kind, totally supportive, feminist. I was at a bar doing karaoke like a few months after getting my IUD. I didn't know it at the time, but I ran into her husband at the bar. Like he had like pulled me aside after I had sung a couple of songs, and he was like making eyes at me, kind of getting flirty. Through conversation, I'm trying to figure out, like, this guy's clearly not from around here. He had like a Patagonia, this is Kentucky. What are you doing with North Face? Whatever it was. Like, he was clearly an outsider. So I'm trying to get a read on him, figure out his story. And he said, oh, my wife's a doctor. I was like, oh my goodness, where does she work? And then he named the office. And I was like, oh my gosh, will you tell me her first name? Because I think I know who you're talking about. And that was, it was a brilliant, like, when you're getting unwanted male attention, like, I can't imagine a better card than like, no, your wife is beautiful. She's also been inside me. Like, this is the end of this conversation, right? Like, met my gynecologist husband randomly at a karaoke bar. What the hell?
LOL. That's great.
That's really hilarious. Okay, so we're coming up on the Halloween weekend. This will go live after, but I would love to know, Maggie, what are you dressing up for as Halloween? Alex, you can share too. I am not. I'm just gonna wear this cool skeleton sweatshirt on Halloween while I go trick-or-treating with my son. But want to know because I've been like watching your like Styloween videos that you've been posting on Facebook, and I'm like, okay, what is she actually going to be? So what are you gonna be for Halloween?
Officially, I'm going to be dressed as a Viking. It's a couple's costume. So my partner and I are both Vikings. And I am like chomping at the bit to share the photos because we did the shoot last weekend. But with Halloween, it's a very fixed moment in time. You got to like time it just right. So yeah, Styloween, thank you for calling that out. It's my favorite freaking day of the year. So I went all out this year. But yeah, stay tuned for Viking regalia photos.
Awesome. That's awesome. We're doing a family costume because my babies can't object yet because they don't have the words to tell me no thank you. So we are going to be the snuggle bugs. So they're both going to be dressed up as butterflies. And I got my husband and I like bathrobes. And so as a collective unit, we will be the snuggliest bugs you've ever seen. So it's going to be pretty cute.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, Maggie, where can people learn about you and your amazing work?
First up would be social media. You mentioned tweeting earlier. I'm not really active on Twitter, but my handle across all platforms is at Green Style Mags. That's green like the color, the word style, MAGS, or my website. You can sign up for my newsletter, follow my blog, certainly. And that URL is Maggie Greene, green like the color with an E at the end, style.com.
All right, thank you. And I hope that listeners that Maggie's story has helped you feel more or less alone and more like you belong, and has like empowered you. I hope that you can hear like the lifted energy that she has in closing out this interview. I hope you get a chance to check her out at maggiegreenstyle.com. Thank you so much, Maggie, for being on today's show. And thank you to all the listeners and supporters of the Shed the Shame campaign. You are really helping us support what the work that WaterAid is doing to provide clean water and sanitation across the globe. And if you'd like to be a guest and, get deep and vulnerable, but also like fun and lighthearted, feel free to email us at podcast@shedtheshame.co. And to learn more about Shed the Shame, you can visit the website shedtheshame.co. And until next time, let's just keep it real and messy, just like periods. Thanks.
Thank you.